You've fluked it yet again, Adam. What can I say? Just
I know.
fortuitousness.
Continuously lucky.
It's not strategy, mate. I mean, I don't give you credit for strategy at all. I think it's
Almost,
like
almost as if I ask millions of questions
no. I think it's more like you
and listen.
chuck enough darts at the board. Well,
That's
mate,
right. One in every 50 things I do works.
that's my approach with content, man. It's like quantity over quality every time. Just get his stuff out there. Who knows? You know, you can't rely on one thing to work. Something's going to work. Just get it out there. Which is why everybody, it's Brain Food Live on air every week, no fail, constantly coming out relentlessly. It's like Terminator. Brain Food Live just doesn't stop. It keeps on grinding forward. It is episode 281. Welcome, everybody. And we are going to, it's a very exciting show. It's been a very exciting week. But I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you today it's going to be an interesting topic. And folks, we know it's sort of very emotional, very tough on a lot of people, particularly in our recruitment industry. I did a poll. I've been running loads of polls on who the recruitment industry in general and the brain food marketplace in particular are looking for when it comes down to, preferred candidate for presidency in the US. It was like 80% Kamala really was the desire. That hasn't been the result. But let's have a look at it in terms of what we anticipate the impact on TA and HR will be. I suspect it will be quite significant because whereas Harris is pretty much a continuation sort of candidate, Trump is obviously going to be a disruptive one. So this is going to be very interesting for us to discuss with a bunch of friends who've got opinions on this. How does Trump 2.0 impact talent acquisition and HR? That's the topic today, folks. So I hope you're be sort of tuned into the right event. This is super early, of course, for our friends in the US, but hopefully they'll be able to tune in at least from the East Coast. This will be available on record for anybody who isn't able to see it live. Okay, let's just do some sound checks as usual, folks. If you're watching this in Crowdcast, do let me know in the chat whether you can hear me okay. I should be broadcasting this. In fact, a few people are broadcasting this. So if you can hear this on LinkedIn, let me know in the comments. I believe Steve Rothenberg is broadcasting this also. And Rob Walker, as always, I believe is broadcasting this as well. So if you're watching it on either of those two fine gentlemen's LinkedIns, let us know in the comments whether the audio and visual is okay. Loud and clear. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Kate. Great. Thank you, everybody. This is Crowdcast is definitely the place to watch it. Sorry, mate.
Why is mine not doing it?
I'm doing it.
Broadcasting on LinkedIn.
Are you not?
I set it all up, so I don't know. Something's come unplugged somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, you should check it out, man. I mean, obviously useful to do, but never mind. Anyway, let's crack on. Before we get on, actually, we need to obviously thank our sponsors for sponsoring Brain Food Live every week. A company steps up to do just that, make sure the conversation keeps rolling. And this week, it is one of our very good friends, and in fact, one of the most interesting and I believe impactful products that have landed onto recruiters' laps over the last 12, 18 months or so. Obviously been going around longer, but I think they've really pushed through and broke through at high impact in terms of awareness and productivity gains. This is MetaView.ai. So if you haven't used any interview intelligence product, do check MetaView out. They're also rolling out tons of new features every single week, it seems. Loads of interesting things going on there. But why do I need to talk about it when I have got Stephanie Simis here that's going to tell us all about it? Let me just see if I can bring Stephanie on. And she can help us do that. Actually, I don't seem to be able to do that. It's conveniently crashed on me. Oh no. Steph, I don't know what to do, mate. I kind of exit the page or wait. Adam, you're still here. So what I'm going to do is exit the page. What will occur, I anticipate, is that I'm going to go off air. But you're still there holding the fort. Yeah.
And I'm going to run Brain Food Live like I have done half a dozen times in the last 10 years.
I'm going to have to refresh. Give me a sec.
So while he's refreshing, I just want to point out that this is not a political show unless Hung's made changes to it. And so I think it's quite interesting that 87% of people that took part in Hung's poll said their preference was for Kamala to win the US election, which shows that we don't have anything like a diverse audience and community here. We've got a very much I don't know whether the word to describe it is more liberal than conservative, but I can see that on the Facebook groups I'm in, the talent acquisition focused Facebook groups I'm in. I imagine that LinkedIn's going to be a bit of a broader audience, but generally this Brainfooder community does not reflect society in the US at all. So it is interesting to consider that when, no doubts, we're going to have a session of talking about possibly the bad things that are likely to happen as a result of the US election. And I don't imagine it's going to be a particularly balanced discussion, but I'm just mentioning this because it'd be nice if it was. Not that I'm a Trump supporter specifically, which I should probably say, but don't want to overstress that. No, the US is not for everyone. There's so many great things about it. I'm just going to tell you what I think while he's waiting, while he's coming on. He's now on twice. See, the US, honestly, I really think it does some things better than anybody else in the world. And it does some things as if it's like 150 years ago. It's really peculiar to me. But anyway, I love it, right, regardless.
I'm back. Can everyone hear me okay? I think so, right? Apologies for this. I think Crowdcast pushed an update whilst I was there. But no worries. Let's bring Stephanie on. If I can, why can't I grab hold of her? This is so annoying. Right, onto main stage before anything happens. I tell you what, man, some of these UX kind of changes, they're just a bit tricky and fiddly. But yeah, hopefully we're here now. Anyway, Adam, I heard what you were saying. I think you're absolutely right. This is not a political show per se. We're not going to say good, bad, maybe. We're going to talk about the impacts. Like, what are the impacts we think? But anyway, we have Stephanie here. Thank you very much for joining us, Stephanie.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great. Steph, why don't you tell us quickly who you are, what it is you do, and then we can kick off. We can hear you talk about MetaView for a bit.
Sure, perfect. Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I'm a longtime listener and kind of behind the scenes collaborator with Hung. But yeah, first time speaking to you guys here. So excited to be here. I'm from the team at MetaView. Hopefully a lot of the Brainfood community is already kind of aware of who we are and what we do. But for anyone who is still part of the uninitiated, we're kind of best known as the most loved AI note taker that's built specifically for recruiting. So our AI basically creates perfectly structured and super accurate summaries of any of your recruiting conversations. And then on top of that, we have really powerful AI assistants and reporting that can help you, number one, save huge amounts of time. And number two, make it so much easier to kind of pull out the data and insights from hiring conversations. So it's always free to get started on your first 5 calls. So you can just head over to metaview.ai to check that out. But really quickly today, I just wanted to show you a very cool new resource that we have just put out that's free for anyone to use. So you don't have to be a MetaView customer. And it essentially is a free suite of AI co-pilots that we built to boost the productivity of recruiting teams. And the first one that we just launched, I guess was last week, is an interview questions generator. So if I am able to share my screen, I can give you a very quick overview of how that works. Let me just go here. Great, can you see my screen okay?
I think we might have to wait for a bit. Can you see
it now? Yep.
There it is. Okay. Oh no, I think we lost one. Cool. So as you can see here, it's an LLM that's fine-tuned to help you generate interview questions. So it has this sort of ChatGPT-esque interface. And basically, all you have to do is start by pasting in your job description. So I have one here from a role at MetaView for a backend engineer. I'm just going to enter that in. The AI has to think for a second, and then it is going to, as you can see here, start generating interview questions that I could ask in a conversation with the candidate about this role, based specifically on the background and the experiences that have been mentioned in this job description. And then I can give it more direction. So I can, let's say I want to say, can you add in questions to assess customer focus? And then the AI is going to take that into account and bring me up some questions that are specifically designed to test for that skill. So what's cool is I can also ask the AI to generate some follow-up questions for me, and then even show me a rubric for what a good, a bad, or an excellent response might look like to these different questions. So you can kind of go back and forth with the AI, get the exact questions that you want to include, and then it's really easy to just click share, and you can send those off to hiring managers or anyone else in the hiring team. So that's just the first of these free tools that we have launched. We have a new one coming quite soon, so keep your eye on this space. Yeah, that's basically it. Please do reach out if you want to learn more about MetaView or just about how to get started with this interview questions tool. We would love to chat to you. Yeah,
Stephanie, Michael said in the comments, I love to be interviewed by AI, but that's sarcastic because he put in brackets, I don't.
Yeah.
He's not actually being interviewed by AI here, is he? This is an interview questions generator as opposed to an actual AI interviewer.
Yes. Yeah. So to clarify, this would be a tool that you would use to basically help you come up with ideas for questions that you want to ask for whatever the role might be that you're hiring for. So you could come to this for ideas and inspiration, and then you as a human would ask those questions. So yeah, no direct contact here between the AI and the candidate.
Hi, Hung.
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry, I'm back. Basically, there's massive bugs in what I'm doing here, so it's going to be off and on. I'm afraid, Adam, you have to shoulder the burden of trucking on as I kind of wrestle with this. But Stephanie, thanks so much for doing the demo. I did watch this whilst I was off screen. So fantastic to see this. Mm-hmm. I've shared the link into the Crowdcast, of course. Do check out MetaView.ai. Wonderful product, great team also. I don't know whether you're still doing a free trial. I mean, that's still happening?
Yeah, yeah. Free trial is always available on your first 5 calls, so no reason not to try it. Yep.
Absolute no-brainer. Get it on. I mean, if you're not using a product that does this type of function, even the base functionality, note-taking, if that's the only thing that you're still missing, then just give this a shot. Free to go, and then you can test it and upgrade if you find that it's the product for you. Okay, great to see you, Stephanie. We'll catch up soon. Okay.
Thanks. See you later.
Cool. So Adam, we might have to go real quick on the newsletter review, given the kind of crap I'm trying to deal with this product here. So yeah, do you want to give us just one thing that we can talk about, and then we'll get on with the conversation?
Just one, right? Okay. Well, if I'm going to choose one, it's going to be the article which was about software service as a software, and how a system of agents can really bring that to life. So let's talk about what this means, in simple terms. So agents are like the next evolution of bots. It's like bots, but they've got a deeper understanding of tasks. They can interact with complex systems. They understand better context. And if they can interact with each other as well, right, that really brings it all to even more power. So they can start really acting like humans. I wish they hadn't used this term, service as a software, because it sounds like it's the alternative to software as a service, but it's not. It's a different thing. But the similarity is a bit confusing, to be honest. But anyway, key phases are, first of all, looking through workflow automation. How can we automate certain tasks? And then moving into AI-driven agents, which can start to use context to kind of actually start to make decisions. But then when you bring all of that together, a system of agents can almost really function like a team or like human individuals. So like anybody out there that thinks, gosh, this sounds like science fiction. I mean, this is like happening today. It's really replicating people's jobs. The only question really is how long before mass adoption. But you're living in a dogmatic world if you are really thinking that this is not going to take over jobs. It definitely is going to take over jobs.
Yeah, it's a really gone.
Just one other thing. It also links to, I've said this on Brainfood Live a couple of times, the role of a talent acquisition leader is going to have to become the role of how do we establish how our corporate tasks get done, right? And decision number one is when we need a new product line rolled out, or we need to enter a new market, or whatever it is, the strategic things that our company is going to be doing. Question number one is this an automation, or is it a technology solution, or is it humans? And that decision should be made by the person who is currently the head of talent acquisition, needs to elevate into that role. They'll have a lot more power over how the organization works. But if you don't do it, you're going to be reporting to somebody who is making those decisions.
Yeah, no question. TA, we need to basically expand scope horizontally and also vertically. And we also need a rebrand. I mean, I'm afraid to say we can't call it talent acquisition because it's really about capability delivery, making capabilities to the business available, whether that's a human being or a robot or something else. That's besides the point. But we, as people that might understand sort of workflow, we're the folks that are in a reasonable position to do this. But step number one is even to try and obviously self-enable ourselves. You know, we need to use tools like MetaView, tools like Poetry, whatever it is. We need to get onto that wagon ASAP. That wagon's going to roll out of control essentially, and we're going to be left behind. Simple as. Anyway, we'll be talking about that. I will be talking about that next week when I'm in Anaheim. By the way, I'll be visiting the US next week. In fact, I'll be visiting on Sunday, landing on Sunday. So I look forward to seeing everyone there. ERE Anaheim, if you're going on Tuesday, I think it's a 2-day event, come up and say hello. I'll also be there at the Candies Awards as well, which would be a fantastic dinner with Kevin Grossman and all of those good guys there. So we'll see everyone there. Okay, before I bring on our guests, I want to do a quick screen share. Take a risk and screen share because I want to show you what is the sort of the manifesto of Donald Trump. So this is just the basic sketch notes as to what Donald Trump is going to do. So let's have a look at this.
When you say sketch notes, it's actually written on a napkin, is it? Oh no, it's real. Sorry,
it's not me that's written it, but I think this is basically.
No, I meant him. He's just written.
Yeah. I think this is basically what he's going to do. So just a quick kind of glance at this. I'm going to write about this on the Open Kitchen section on my other newsletter on Monday. Just unpack some of this. But it's worth just reviewing because this is going to be the topic of our conversation as we bring on our guests. A few things. I'm going to read them out real quick. Number one, seal the border, stop migrant invasion, quote unquote. Number two, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. This is like removing undocumented workers, which, by the way, actually do fulfill a significant component of a lot of industries in the US. End inflation. Like, how is he going to do that? I don't think he knows. Make America dominant an energy producer by far. I think America already is the number one energy producer, so maybe even more of this. Stop outsourcing and turn the United States of America into a manufacturing superpower. That's a very interesting claim. Number six, large tax cuts for workers, no tax on tips. Number seven, defend Constitution. This is going on about freedom of speech and so on. Number eight, prevent World War III. I think we can all agree that's a good idea. 9, end weaponization of government against the American people. So I think that's him saying, okay, don't imprison me. 10, stop migrant crime epidemic. Destroy cartels, etc. So this is again anti-immigrant. Rebuild our cities, number 11. So this could be urban renewal coming, which is interesting. Today he was talking about getting rid or dispersing a lot of the government agencies out of Washington, D.C. and distributing them across the U.S. So that's going to be an interesting impact on HR and TA. 12, strengthen and modernize our military. Of course, which we know as president isn't going to say that and do that. 13, keep the USD as the world's reserve currency. Of course, every American president will probably say that, even though, by the way, that contradicts some of the plans of bringing back manufacturing, but never mind. Number 14, protect Social Security. Okay, he's not going to cut anything. He claims he's not going to cut anything there. 15, cancel the EV mandate and cut regulations on this. So I think that was something that Biden had in place, which is to give kind of subsidies, for instance, for people buying EVs. That may be cut. Cut federal funding for schools pushing critical race theory, gender ideology. So this obviously impacts people in our space, DE&I. I think he's probably the most anti-DE&I president or even political leader anywhere on the planet right now. That's going to have a huge impact on us. Keep men out of women's sports. Again, that's underlining his cultural war position. Deport pro-Hamas radicals. Okay, so this is particularly specific to the university protests against Israel. 19, secure elections, and 20, unite and bring record levels of success. Okay, anyway, so I'm sure everyone's seen that. That is the topic. It's basically what we're going to try and talk about going through. Let's see what our guests have got to say on this. Okay, I'm going to try and bring people on, but I think this might crash. Adam, do you know how to do this? Or Vaguely. Can you do it? Yeah, but I'm going to try and... Shit, I've done the wrong thing.
Do you know what is utterly brilliant about that manifesto?
Yeah.
It is the fact that language is language that 80% of people can understand. They can understand the words that he said. 95% of people cannot understand any sentence that's spoken by almost every other politician because it's utter bullshit. It's politicians talking to each other, and they have to cut out that crap of talking in nonsense language to each other that most people can't follow. The one thing Trump's done there is spoken to almost everybody can understand what he says. Whether you like what he's saying or you don't like what he's saying, that's not important. What is important is everybody can understand it, and that gives him a massive advantage.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think in terms of a communication, I mean, this is an aside from the conversation we're about to have, but as a political kind of phenomena, I think you have to respect that he is very much the modern president, in the sense, the modern political leader even, because he's able to communicate with people at a resonant level that other, by the book, by the script type politicians can't do. And I think in future, political leaders are going to have to be much better at speaking off the cuff, much better at having direct dialogue with people, rather than the media trained type of speech, which I think we're all switching away from. So yeah,
and we can all very considerably learn from that in recruiting, because when we're distributing our employer brand messaging, or if you're like me running a tech business, you're distributing your messaging on that, and it's like utter bullshit. People can't follow it. They don't listen, and most of the tech vendors in our space do that, and I don't know what half of them do. And I've been in it for 25 years. So, we need to talk in simple language that people understand.
It's true enough. I mean, I get scripts to read sometimes, and obviously I reject them because it's like, this is obviously going to read as a script and it's not going to work. You got to just trust, me messing up on screen, which is something I do obviously very often. Anyway, let's say hi to our wonderful guests. Let's go in sort of clockwise order as I see it. Jim Stroud, wonderful to see you. I will see you next week, sir. So wonderful to see you on screen. Jim, for the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure, I'm the editor of SourceCon, the premier sourcing conference in the world, and I've been involved in the recruitment industry one way or another for 2 decades and counting.
Fantastic to have you on, Jim. We have Stephen Rothberg here as well. Stephen, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. I am the founder of College Recruiter. I'm not in a bunker or an undisclosed location. It's a job search site for early career candidates. Immigrant to the U.S. Grew up in Canada, and used to lean one way politically, now lean another.
Fantastic to have you on, Stephen. Brian, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself, who are you, what it is you do?
Yes, I'm also an immigrant. I'm from the United States, and I've moved to England. I help navigate the phases of change and growth by aligning leadership strategy, culture, and organizational HR. And I help leaders and teams perceive, understand, and act on the challenges they face.
Fantastic stuff. And we have Kate here as well. Wonderful to see you, Kate. I believe I'll see you next week as well. Kate, I think you're muted, I believe. Is that right?
No, I will not see you next week.
No, okay. Well, I'm very disappointed about that. Well, at the very least, well, let's say I'm seeing you now. So can you quickly introduce yourself, who are you, what it is you do, Kate?
I suffer from law degree, so I advise management all about how to stay compliant with employment law.
Yeah. Fantastic stuff. Okay, let's kick into it, folks. I'm going to try maybe the biggest sort of point on the Trump manifesto is public sector. And there is some sense that, there may be a significant reduction of the public sector in terms of size. We know that it's the country's biggest employer. I think 25 million people currently in the US are government workers. We also know that a large percentage of the job growth that we saw under the Biden period was from the public sector also. And yet Trump is obviously pretty much anti-public sector. He's talked about abolishing entire departments, redistributing departments. He's got Elon Musk there, potentially have him sort of fitted up as some minister of efficiency. You know what he did with Twitter? Came in, 80% gone. It's like instant. What are you doing this week kind of thing? So do we think he's going to, do we think that's going to happen? Or do you think the system is just going to be a lot more difficult and resistant against this than a private sector organization might be? Jim, let's go to you on this. What are your thoughts on public sector employment under the Trump presidency?
He's going to cut it significantly. They play ads, and you couldn't escape the presidential election if you tried here. So I've heard a lot of talking points, and I've heard consistently that he's going to do that. You mentioned Elon Musk. That's one of the reasons why he wants to make him an efficiency czar, or whatever he's going to call it, looking at what he did with Twitter. I think he did it also in his previous administration, where if you wanted to start a new government agency, you had to cut 2 others. So that's a consistent thing he's done from him. That's a consistent thing he's done, and I fully expect him to do that again.
Yeah, interesting. How about you, Kate? Your thoughts on this?
Well, if federal employees have a property right in their position, and so if he's going to be cutting people because of their political beliefs, they can sue him, and they'll win. A lot of the time. So while I think you can throw away your affirmative action plans as of January 22nd, 2025, and so the OFCCP will be gone, I don't think there'll be enough to say 20% of the federal government is going to be gone, because his initial thoughts of removing that 20% are based on political beliefs. And so those folks will sue. And there are already lawyers signing up for those positions. I don't know if he's going to be successful in closing the Department of Education, because when you look at what the Department of Education does, because that's one of his number 1 targets, I just don't see folks really saying, oh yeah, our disabled kids don't need to have accommodations anymore. So I just don't see that being that successful. I think the threats are there, but I don't think that's going to be necessarily as successful.
Question. I'm sorry, just jump in. I hear what you're saying there. I can certainly see your point. What? And I don't know all the law stuff like you, so I'm just asking out the blue. If he said that we're going to cut Department of Education, all of the federal influence, I don't know the right word. We're going to cut all the federal influence of the Department of Education, and now it belongs to the state. So each state has to do their own Department of Education. If they want to do that, we're just going to cut it at a federal level. Mm-hmm. And if he does that, that sounded to me like I'm cutting something that, will agree or not, that he sees as wasteful. And and it's like, okay, we're going to take out the federal budget, and now it's a state problem. So you as a state, if you feel that education is important, then you do it. Does that make sense? And if he does that, would that mean that he's being, I don't know, showing racism or something if he says, we're going to just give it to the states and we're not going to do it? Does that make sense? Because like, I don't see firing people because of the political beliefs in
That's the idea of taking it out of the federal government. I'll continue to use the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act idea, which provides IEPs for students who have disabilities. If you take that out of the federal budget, all of the red states, all of them, don't have the money to have those programs in place. So all of those kids with disabilities will no longer need to be accommodated in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, most of the time, the federal government doesn't give states enough money to fund the reasonable accommodations already. So in red states already, they're not getting the education that they are deserving under federal law. So if you cut that department and you say, this is all going to be for the states, you're taking a significant portion of the US and saying, well, now they just don't have any program. That's what you're saying. Because all of the red states are takers. All of the blue states are givers. We pay more in taxes that ends up in a red state. And if you take this program out, guess what? The state of Minnesota gets to keep its money and continue to fund kids with disabilities. But Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Texas won't.
Well,
so
let me step in. Let me step in. I mean, obviously, there's disputation as to what is a good or bad idea, right? So but we don't want to necessarily go down that route because that was the decision basically that you guys had on Tuesday. But we can say that what it seems to be the case, Trump has the impulse to do this, but he's going to be stuck in the weeds to a certain degree because there's obviously he has to do things by the law. But he may be able to do things at the federal level, which is cut the budget. I think he can certainly do that, in which case you could create that effect effectively downstream. And if it is the case that the states will then own some of those options, then we can see that manifest. Ultimately, what that means from an employment point of view is that we're going to see significant amount of public sector workers probably made redundant, I would imagine. Would that be general fair comment or just an observation on that? Anyway, Brian and Stephen, I haven't brought you in on this, but have you any thoughts on sort of what you think is going to happen on public sector employment in Trump in his next term?
Stephen?
I think a lot of what Jim and Kate said, I agree with, but let me sort of add a little bit of nuance to convey my thinking. One is for those who aren't that familiar with like what a red state and a blue state is and sort of how important that is. So if in a typical election, forget just that for president, but also look at the other offices that people are electing, the state legislatures, the governors. The US is roughly 3/4 red states. 3/4 of the red states lean Republican and 1/4 lean Democrat, more or less. And so when Kate's talking about red states eliminating, aid for disabled kids, that's probably going to impact about 3/4 of the states. It's roughly half of the population. My thought on this is similar to Kate's in that you're going to have a really hard time eliminating a lot of federal employees. It's aspirational, but I don't think it's something that Trump can come in on day one. There is something that really concerns me though, is that late in his first term, he put in an executive order that would basically reclassify a significant minority of federal employees so that rather than being career civil servants with job protections, instead they would become political appointees. So if he does that first and then replaces those people, that to me is a logical path. Whether he can be successful in reclassifying all those people after the litigation happens, that's an open question. And I suspect Kate is skeptical that he'll be successful there. On the other hand, the US Supreme Court has basically said now that a president is a sovereign and they can do anything they want to when they're in office. I mean, there are really no limitations. So the president's immune from being held criminally responsible for his actions, but anybody else underneath him is. I do think you're going to see some resistance by people 1, 2, 3, 4 levels down to enacting some of his policies. I suspect we're going to see a shift where you're going to have entire departments eliminated, like OFCCP, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Those departments are going to be gone, probably within a year or two. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if you see at least as much hiring in other departments. Think Customs and Border Protection. Think Secret Service. Trump, for all of those on the left who are worried about him starting World War III, actually, he's kind of been more the opposite. So I really don't see his election as increasing the likelihood of the U.S. going to war. He's more about, well, war is bad for the economy. and he's much more interested in the economy.
Initially, it's bad for economy. I think it's good for economy in a little bit after, because the defense sector really ramps up and that helps the economy. I mean, boomers exist because of World War II.
This is true.
Yeah,
enough.
you'd rather spend that money on roads than on missiles.
Okay, let's put a lid on this, because we've got so many more topics to talk about. But what we can see is that ultimately going to be changes in the public sector. There's going to be legal resistance, obviously, at various levels in the process, but we can anticipate that actually there will be some big changes. Maybe some big agencies will go. I think you're right, Jim, when you mentioned that, the ability to start an agency, there'll be a veto on that maybe, and there'll just be this drive to reduce bloat, so to say. Actually parallels a little bit of what we're seeing in corporate sector, and obviously this will be accelerated by the presence of people like Elon Musk, who obviously is now pretty much got Trump's ear. So really interesting to see this. Let's talk about the DE&I side of things. That's another topic that obviously Trump is very prominent on. He won sort of the election, I think, in large part because of tapping into a sentiment that perhaps diversity, equity, and inclusion was not the true American way. And so what do you think is going to happen there? I speculate that things like I think the effect is going to happen more at the corporate level, because I suspect a lot of companies will now kind of either stop sort of the diversity approaches that they had, or perhaps go to the meritocratic view. Coinbase were early with this. Will we see that kind of cultural shift having a more of an impact rather than any legal changes? What are your thoughts on this? Brian, bring you in on this idea?
Well, of course, we can't predict exactly what's going to happen. I think we know, based on his first administration and his campaign and his temperament, that the hallmark characteristic of the next 4 years is going to be distraction and churn. And whether something happens to this level or this level or this level, nobody knows. But I look at this through an organizational lens, and even though the United States would be a terribly complicated organization, there's only so much you can take away from a group of people and from established practices and institution and norms and everything else before all of the oxygen in whatever organization gets completely consumed. So you can only go after so much cultural warfare before there's just nothing else going on. You can only go after so much cost reduction by removing departments and everything else before there's just nothing. There's just no more energy to this. So none of us can predict exactly what he's going to do, because clearly we can't take him at his word, because Republicans and the party says don't take him at his word. He doesn't have any actual plans. That list that you read that Adam said, and I understand what he means about being common language, is basically gobbledygook. because the complexity involved in all of these things is just far, far greater than these sort of fast food sound bites. So the order of the day is going to be churn. And if we're looking at this from an HR perspective, HR and talent, for the most part, really doesn't like all of this distraction and all of this internal upset, because it's very hard to make plans and recruit people. It's hard to hire people into an organization that's just chaotic, right? You don't understand the right match. You don't understand how to evaluate them. They don't stick. So as we look at this purely from an HR lens now, how we're supposed to be navigating all this, I'm really going to encourage people to recognize that maintaining your own balance, regardless of all the individual distractions, is the most important thing. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I do think that companies will probably plow their own path generally. So we need to understand the relationship with sort of companies and governments. You know, we're not following diktats in the same way that, you know, it might first appear. But there may be some, you know, big sort of signals to the CEO level and the CHRO level saying, actually, we're going to do this rather than that, or we're not going to push this rather than that. And that might influence approach. I think CEOs generally have shown, let's say, a conditional commitment to D&I. We've seen that over the last couple of years, pre-Trump, right? In the sense that, you know, when everyone was pro D&I, obviously when times were good and money was cheap, and you know it was easy to it wasn't expensive, shall we say, to promote these policies. But as soon as cost of business, cost of living kind of crisis occurred, suddenly we saw budgets cut on D&I. We saw the number of jobs cut as well. We saw the amount of times diversity and inclusion was discussed at board level completely drop, right? So maybe Trump is signaling hard. We're going to probably continue that way, I would guess, but it may not be any big policy sort of directive from the top, is what I'm getting from this. Anybody want to comment on this before we move on to next point? Go ahead, Stephen. Sorry, Kate, we'll come to you after.
Sorry, Kate. So two things. One is I disagree that Americans elected Trump as a way of expressing hostility to immigrants, to minority groups. I think as I kind of digested more about the election, I kept coming back to like the Simon Sinek video, like The Power of Why, I think is what it's called. And I think what Trump was able to tap into was everybody's concerns about their wallets. And people are almost everybody, I think I saw something like 87% of people today versus 4 years ago feel more financial stress. Some of that's student loans, some of that's inflation. You know, their whole housing costs are a lot higher. Eggs are still 3 times as high as they were just a few years ago. There's, you know, issue after issue after issue like that, interest rates. But he had to explain to people in ways that they could understand that they weren't the problem was somebody else. And so that kind of gave them the comfort, that they were being rational, they were being objective. It wasn't that I'm against migrants from Mexico. It's that migrants from Mexico are holding down wages. And if we eliminate the immigration from Mexico and wages go up, that means that I'm going to be better able to afford the apartment that I live in. You know, I think that was more the reason why Trump was elected than any kind of backlash against people who were transgender, you know, or illegal immigrants. I'll leave it there. I'm sure that Kate can add a hell of a lot more there.
If I can inject really quickly too, if I may, forgive me, Kate, real quick.
I'm a woman. I experience it every day.
Okay, apologies there. So
including on Tuesday.
Yes, on Tuesday. One thing that I see consistently is that people conflate illegal immigration with immigration.
Yeah.
And I think and I see it on the news all the time. I hear it in political talk when they say one side is against the migrants. there are a lot of, and I think that's part of the reason why Trump got a lot of minority support from people who people say he's against. Not that I'm being an apologist or anything, but there's a distinct difference in my mind of people who go through the system, obey the rules, and then walk in the front door versus a bazillion people walking over the fence, so to speak, and just coming in. People who aren't vetted that I don't know. That will affect a lot of people's viewpoint on the legal issue, which I think was another reason why he got elected. The other point Stephen made that about the economy, I think that's also another big reason why, he got elected. I looked at Perplexity, I looked at U.com and a few other LLMs, and I asked the question, how did the economy perform? How did business investment and jobs perform in 2016 when he was elected? And when I looked at that data, I thought that people who have a strong belief that no matter what, if you're a one issue voter, if the only thing you think about is the economy, there's certainly a lot of things you can think about. But if the economy was your issue, then I think a lot of people went that way because they said, okay, I might not like everything about him, but both sides tend to agree that when it comes to the money, to the economy, that he does a good job. So I think, to Stephen's point, the economy was a big issue as to why he got elected there.
All right, let's just intercede real quick on that. I mean, what we have seen, by the way, irrespective of political position, is that every incumbent government that has in a country that has an election has basically been defeated over the last 2-3 years. And it's basically, I think, every country that's experienced high inflation, people have just voted out the incumbents. So I think there's an element of truth there, even though you can say that, Trump, it wasn't Trump's economy. It was simply the fact that there was huge amounts of cheap credit in the market. That was the Federal Reserve policy. It's nothing to do with the politician per se. But anyway, that's basically what happened.
Apologies.
Kate, go ahead.
Hold on, my apologies. I was mansplaining over Kate.
No. Go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely, you were. My opinion is that you take the DEI piece, and we know when we actually look at every fact and every objective measure that organizations that are more diverse, that have more women in leadership, that have more individuals of color in leadership do better. But that doesn't get past the grievance narrative that these other people are causing my eggs to be more expensive. And unfortunately, those facts don't break through. And so the feeling is the fact. And so we blame these other people for it. And then we say, we elect someone who's going to validate our feeling on this. We're going to see the loss of the the OFCCP. We're going to see organizations backpedaling on blatant, explicit DEI measures. But that doesn't change the fact that doing that doesn't actually change the facts. If we do deportations, if we have massive tariffs, the GDP shrinks by 8.9%. And so if we enact this, we're going to see massive changes that you're going to have buyer's remorse. You're not going to get the results that you actually want. And so I think in 2 years, we're going to see not the results that he is promising with his easy to understand language. I think what we're going to see is from a TA perspective, it's going to be much harder to find people because you lose the forces that are giving us lettuce, that are plucking getting us the chickens. We lose the people who drive the economy. Costs go up, and now you don't need to find people because we can't afford people. So I think there's going to be that kind of dramatic shift because we're not validating the actual facts. We're just validating feeling.
Can I ask a question, guys?
Right. Kate's completely right on the data.
No, Brian,
completely right on all the data.
can I just ask one question, just if anybody knows?
Mhm.
Like, do we know sort of the approximate number of undocumented workers in the US, and do we know what kind of work that they do? I am of the opinion, and I'm from the outside guy, so I'm not one of these as an expert, but I am of the opinion that basically a lot of the work that basically native folks don't want to do are going to be as done by sort of illegal workers, farm working, abattoir work, sanitation, all of that stuff. We saw this during COVID, by the way.
Yes.
You know, all of the
Mhm.
essential workers that we all cared about, a bunch of them were actually sort of undocumented people. Those folks in that bridge that kind of collapsed, and those guys that got killed in that, weren't they undocumented? So
Yeah.
let's not forget that the US economy may be hugely dependent on these people. How
Mhm.
many people are undocumented? We've got a huge number
11
here from
million.
Michael. I don't think that's true. 20 million. How many?
It's
Does
11
anyone
million.
know?
Yeah,
11
11
million?
million.
yeah, I agree with Kate. I think everybody agrees it's at least 11 million.
Yeah,
There
a
were
big number, right?
there were some people, I think Trump at some point said something like 25 million or something. That was probably an exaggeration, but they're probably 11 million. How many of those are of working age? How many of those who are of working age are working? You know, that number is probably some more like 4 or 5 million. But it's not just the farm workers and the sanitation workers. I wouldn't be surprised if at least a quarter of the gig workers are undocumented. There was a story in the New York Times, I think it was maybe a month or probably 2 months ago now, about a woman who kind of ran this massive enterprise where she was registering for Uber and Instacart and all these different gig platforms, and then using these fake profiles to employ undocumented workers, and they would kind of kick back a portion of their wages to her. So although, so you get into an Uber and the person bears a somewhat resemblance to the little grainy photo that you can see, do you really know if that person is documented or not? Do you care if they're documented or not? They haven't passed Uber's safety screening, but does it matter if somebody who delivers pizza to your house has documents or not?
I've really enjoyed the discourse that we need to eliminate all background checks, because if we're going to elect a felon as our president, then it doesn't matter whether or not we have felons in our workplaces. And so it doesn't matter if they have immigration status in some
Okay,
positions.
where can I ring a bell? That's a zinger. The zinger of the show goes to Kate. Folks, let me just intercede here.
Panel 0.
Just as a random thought, like, and people may not like this, but I'm just like spitballing. But I'm thinking, okay, let's say Trump does actually succeed in building the fence, kicking out, start deporting people. By the way, it's very difficult to deport people because you actually need to go and arrest them and pull them out. Someone said it got 10K per person, probably a lot more than that actually. So this is going to be physically, the implementation is difficult. But let's imagine he does that and actually people start leaving. Does this not create a recruitment need? Would there not be a scenario that suddenly that you have to hire American? I can imagine Trump being the first president to say, hire American, we're going to put a quota on you. In the same way as you get in lots of countries have nativization laws where they say you must have X percentage of people working. I just came from Dubai, like in certain sort of government sort of departments there, 45% need to be minimum 45% native Emiratis. Now, I think Trump might do that. And then what happens? That's a recruitment need. Horrible that might be. We may not want to get involved in it. But, as this is focused on TA, does it not mean that actually TA is in a job? What are your thoughts?
Can I throw 3 quick thoughts out here?
Go ahead.
One, I think that I think we already have. I'm leaving on Kate's expertise here because she's the lawyer. E-Verify, isn't there like a system already in place to sort of check to make sure you are a citizen? So I can imagine E-Verify or a souped up version of E-Verify coming on board, that kind of thing. Second, with the illegal immigrants that I'm speaking of, if the majority of them are doing, and I'm sure they have more skills than agricultural type skills, I'm just sticking with that as an example. If they do, if the majority of them are coming over to work on farms and manufacturing things like that, very low skilled job, I think the question is going to turn to, what do we do with these workers once automation kicks into high gear? I've seen tons of videos. I'm sure you guys have seen videos. I saw a video where this machine was picking apples from a tree, right? The warehouses were getting more and more automated, right? So at some point in the near future, we're going to have an influx of automation to a point where companies like, say, Amazon aren't hiring as many people because we have robots for that, or we have automation for that. So not only are American citizens finding it hard to work, but also people who are here illegally. Again, nothing against legal migrants. Illegal migrants are here. So it's going to be a bit of a tension in there. And I think it's going to really be seen in a lot of the large cities, because you have a bunch of people who can't find jobs because of automation. What are they going to do? I think some of them will say, okay, you know what, America isn't what I thought it was. I'm going to go back home. I think that's the more likely scenario than someone going into your house and snatching you up, although I think that's going to happen to some degree, hopefully only with criminals, but I don't know.
So, on this note,
well,
Jim,
I advised 2 clients yesterday about how to handle an ICE raid. 2 clients yesterday. And so they're coming. I mean, the best thing any American.
Sorry, Kate, what's an ICE raid? Can you dumb it down for me?
A customs raid. If we're going in to find your undocumented workers, an immigration raid.
Okay, so that's a big deal, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So and I'm in Minnesota. I'm very, very far away from Mexico, and my clients are worried about how do we respond when customs and immigration shows up at our door.
Ooh, so, question for Kate. Question for Kate. Because of that, do you think that a lot of the quote unquote deportation is going to be people freaking out saying, oh, Trump is going to get me, so I'm going to leave before he comes? Or companies going to say, I'm going to get fined out of the wazoo, so I'm going to stop it myself? How much do you think
they can't afford to stop it?
Because they're too dependent on the labor. So they're too dependent on the cheap labor.
Yeah. On this note, by the way, Kai, thank you so much for mentioning it. The UK actually has a limited version of this, in the sense that the Brexit sort of decision actually did have a hard guillotine on a lot of the labor that we previously were relying on. And it's been a persistent problem in hiring for healthcare workers, sanitation people, airport workers, all that type of stuff. Cannot hire them. It's actually where there's been a huge recruitment demand, but the local people don't want to do those work. And as you mentioned, Adam, what's going to happen is we're seeing automation in those places. You go to a restaurant in London now, for instance, it's QR code to order and pay. You know what? That's probably 2 people's work that was previously bussing those tables and taking the bills. So we're going to probably move down an automation route at some point. Jim, I think you got a fair point. But at the same time, there's a lot of work that basically, you can imagine the smaller operations are going to struggle to automate first, because the big farms, they're the ones that can buy the robot. It's the smaller farms that can't do that. So we might actually see a consolidation of economic wealth there.
To your point, to your point, I think as long as the automation is more expensive than hiring these workers, the workers, they have nothing to worry about. When automation gets to a point where it's cheaper to hire a robot than to hire 10 people, or to employ 10 people, even if it's under the table, that's when the real concern is going to go. That's when the concern is going to go exponentially.
Yep. Okay. Quick break, folks. I know it's already at time, but we want to keep going through this for another 20 minutes or so, I think. So, by the way, make sure you connect to everyone who's here. We want to make sure conversations continue. This is an important topic. We don't want to get overly emotional. I know people are sick of politics, but you can't divorce politics from industry anymore. It does impact the work we do. Grab your LinkedIn URL, share it in the chat stream if you're watching this on Crowdcast. Do the same if you're watching this on LinkedIn. Just put it in the comment thread there. Just connect with the folks who you want to connect to there, and make sure that you keep the conversation going. What is the impact for TA and HR? Go ahead, Adam. You need to bounce or something? No? Okay, Adam needs to bounce. That's okay. I'm going to keep rolling forward if that's okay with you guys. There's a few more things I want to talk about. Let's talk about tariff war. So again, one of Trump's headline policies. I think he's probably going to enact it. He did it the last time. It's one of those things that I think, it's going to have impacts that we don't quite understand. But let's say sort of tariffs come in, it looks like hardest case is 20% across the board, everyone. And then 60% on China, which is still a huge exporter to the United States. What do you think that is going to do for TA and HR? So does it mean we're going to hire more local people? Does it mean actually companies will be too broke to grow in that way? What are your thoughts? Brian, go ahead.
Well, absolutely. I mean, for every American voter who displayed a complete ignorance of what a tariff is and how it works, they're about to find out. And this is it's going to be another distraction. It's just all of this is just going to consume all of the energy. So you cannot be productive and actually move things forward when you're constantly pulling things away from people. And I can't see any situation where, again, is it this high, or is it this in the middle, or is it low in terms of the absolute percentage or numbers? That doesn't even matter, really. It's just the whole issue. So of course this is going to affect people, and they're going to trying to put this through an HR lens, they're going to bring all of this distress and all of this upset and all of this uncertainty into the office, into their jobs. And because HR has been the first port of call, especially in the last 5 years through the pandemic, and is always the first port of call during these different economic cycles, we're the ones who are going to have to be ready to process this. And so again, it doesn't really matter. Is it here, or is it here, or is it here? It's the mere fact that this is all going to be, it's not disruption in a positive or a benign sense. It's actually destabilizing. And so people will feel that. And that's why we have to be better in terms of our own capabilities of supporting leaders and managers and teams.
Kate, go ahead.
I have heard anecdotal evidence that organizations are canceling the holiday bonuses in lieu of purchasing supplies now because they're so afraid of the tariffs and how much their inputs are going to be exposed. So they're hoarding cash to buy now so that they don't have that, so they can hopefully reduce the impact of potential tariffs in the future. And that affects TA. That affects our ability to hire.
Yeah. If I may interject too, I saw sort of a real life example of this in Singapore, where it was at the time, which I assume still is, companies really wanted you to hire locally, which really put an impact on the H-1B process, or their version of it there. So I imagine that if there are tariffs against the country, I imagine that the H-1B process will also be, I don't know, right word, strengthened or leveraged in such a way that it's going to be even harder to get an H-1B and sponsor someone out the country when you have this kind of feeling where everything needs to be over here, manufacturing needs to be over here. We are going to put more. I can easily imagine it being harder to get an H-1B sponsored employee.
Yeah, I think so. I think the general vibe is going to be anti-immigration, legal or illegal, I would say, even though there may be some sort of concession to elite talent, so to say. So I remember, Trump's one of his very early commentary about shithole countries and then Norway being amazing. So maybe he ends up sort of having sort of a tiered process where certain immigrants. I mean, the legal way to get into the US is also completely haphazard. That probably is due reform. So maybe that's some positive thing if more energy is put into that space. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. So tariffs are essentially sales taxes on manufactured goods. It's not paid. They're not paid by the country. So if we put a tariff in place on electric vehicles coming from China, it's not the country of China that pays those tariffs. It's whoever is doing the importing. of those goods, depending upon how elastic the demand is, how easy it is for like Americans to buy the same product that was made domestically versus internationally. Some of that cost is going to be shifted to the consumer, and other products it really won't. There won't be much of an increase at all. So it really depends upon the product that's coming in. The impact of tariffs inevitably in the short term for sure is increased prices. You're going to have fewer goods coming in. There's less competition. That's always going to lead to increased prices. Trump's promise is that because the manufacturing will shift to the US, that there'll be more Americans employed with higher wages. And so therefore any increase in prices are okay. We did see some of that coming out of COVID, when Amazon and other companies greatly increased their wages. Although inflation was on the rise, people's wages were going up at an even faster rate in some sectors. So, if you just got a 12% pay boost, but prices go up by 6%, you're still better off. There are going to be some winners and there are going to be some losers. The other thing with tariffs is that although it's not impossible to apply them to services, it's really, really, really hard to apply them to services. So some other countries, like the UK, which is largely service-based, is going to feel the impact of the election less than countries like Germany, which are much heavier into manufacturing. The US imports cars and electric goods from Germany. It doesn't import, consulting services nearly to the same degree as it does with the UK.
Yeah, really good point. I think on the tariff side, Trump actually launched the tariff war, if you remember, in 2016. That did increase prices slightly, but I think there was a bunch of exemptions suddenly granted to try and soften the experience of the consumer at the shop. I would imagine something similar occurring. Although if he rolls out something that's a universal tariff, I think that will have all kinds of consequences, which probably is not good. Because I think Trump underestimates how essentially it's not always finished goods that US is importing. If you're importing lots of nuts and bolts and lots of things that go in, so even the car that you import from Germany, for instance, that will have components made from different countries and all those kinds of places. Suddenly, if you're a manufacturer or an assembler in the US, you'll find that your input costs have gone up, and suddenly you need to rework your budgets. That's going to hurt TA for sure, because it means that you can't plan on what and then it's going to go up in terms of cost. It's not going to go down. So that's going to hurt basically hiring. Okay, folks, we're coming to the very end of this. I am conscious of the fact I'm an ignorant outsider. I've read up on it, whereas you guys have to live it. Can we just, if we can narrow it down in terms of how it affects HR and TA, what's the one thing we've missed from this dialogue so far that you think actually, here's the thing that we haven't talked about, where the Trump administration probably will create this impact or this consequence for our sector? Any thoughts on that?
I'll jump out real quick. As I said earlier, just looking at if someone were just to research 2016 and just look at the economy, there's plenty of other issues to look at. But you look at the economy, businesses were optimistic, stock market reacted favorably just like it did this time. So I think from a business perspective, things are going to look up, provided there's no other world-shaking event like a pandemic or a world war or something like that. I think just pure business, and it won't be overnight for sure. But I think gradually, again, if nothing crazy happens, we should be okay on a business level. And secondly, and on this, earlier when I was talking, I think my exuberance got the best of me. I think I might have offended Kate. And if I did, Kate, I apologize. I hope we can still be friends. That's it.
My concern about going forward is it's going to be really harsh at the beginning, and it probably will stay harsh for a bit. And I don't, adding $7.9 trillion to the deficit, which is what 90% of economists think is going to happen under a Trump administration, just doesn't bode well. We just kick the can further down the road, and we stay in this economic situation, which objectively is awesome at the moment, even though the costs of the goods that we buy every day is expensive. I think they're only just going to get more expensive, and the pain will continue.
Yep. Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Trump's plans are going to explode borrowing costs. The bond markets are already starting to signal that they're not really happy with this. The wide estimates on 1 year's worth of deportation efforts are in the tens of billions of dollars. There is no way to pay for this. There is absolutely no way to pay for this. Again, it's money that's spent on restricting things, on taking things away. So from an HR perspective, as an HR practitioner or a TA practitioner walking into your office or logging on every morning, everyone is going to be feeling these things because people are going to disappear. People are going to be deported, or they're going to leave, or they're going to go into hiding, or family members are going to be disrupted. And there's no real positive economic gain for this. It's all dogma. And the fear that's going to be spread is going to come out in the office. And this is why HR people need to be really, really patient and really, first of all, you have to protect yourself. As an HR person, you have to know what to get involved in, what's your problem, what's your work, and what's not your work. But you have to develop a very, very neutral style to let people actually come to some point where you can meet them where they are and not rush in and try to fix everything. Because if you do that, you'll simply transfer their anxiety to you. It's not going to get fixed. It'll overburden you. They won't feel better and nothing happens. So this is a time for fundamentals. What do you value? What do you believe in? What are your ethics? What's the most fair and consistent way of being a leader and a manager and HR professional? That's my headline.
No, really good point, Brian. And this is a difficult moment. Obviously, it's an emotional sort of outcome for everybody, no matter who won or lost. By the way, there's going to be the political divisiveness, unfortunately, is probably here to stay for everybody in democracies, I think. And one of the things that TA and HR have to try and figure out is, okay, how do we handle a workforce population that might have different opinions on who they wanted in, and can we play some sort of role here that is befitting the role of the function, or are we partisan in the flow? That's, I think, one of the big challenges. Very difficult to navigate. Stephen, final thoughts kind of left to you, I guess. What have we missed from this conversation that needs to be brought up maybe for the next time?
Yeah, I'll try to end, if it's okay, on a little bit more of an optimistic note. And trust me, I never considered voting for the Cheeto, but TA and HR, especially in the U.S., in corporations, in state and local governments, in nonprofits, have an opportunity here that if they can present their places of work as being more stable, as being less subject to the whims of mass hirings, mass firings, but come work here. You just got fired from the federal government, or you're worried about the disruption, your entire department, a Department of Education or whatever, was just eliminated. We have a great place to work. We haven't had layoffs, or we don't do this kind of stuff. So I really do not, as much as I am disappointed by the results of the election, I do not feel that it's all bad. There are some silver linings here.
Yep. And that's a great way to finish this conversation. Thank you very much.
Let's have another call like this in 1 year.
I would love to do it. I mean, I'm interested in all of this.
Totally serious. This is a long game.
I'm interested because, of course, it's a slow-moving beast to have policy kind of enacted. Even with EOs, it's not sort of something that instantly happens. That's just the nature of the beast. So let's see what happens. All we can say is, listen, good luck, America. Good luck, everybody. We could all do with a dash of fortune at any circumstance, and let's hope we'll get there. Okay, folks, that's about it. Thank you all for our guests for joining: Jim Stroud, Kate Bischoff, Brian FJ, Stephen Rothberg. Great to have you on the show, folks. I'll let you go now and get on with your days. I'll see you all hopefully soon. And everyone, thanks for joining. I know that this is a slightly different kind of conversation that we normally have. But it's important, I think, we don't ignore obviously significant moments. And who knows? We're living in this volatile and unpredictable world. We don't actually, we cannot predict with certainty what is a good or bad outcome at this point. Ancient Chinese proverb is always, too early to say, man. Too early to say. Okay, we're going to be back next week. I'm going to be in US. I'm going to be in California up until Friday. So I'm going to be doing a show from Anaheim. And we're going to be talking about the state of sourcing, folks. What is the state of sourcing? We're going to basically be launching the review of the year look back series. So the next, I think, 5 or 6 shows are all going to be look back on 2024. We've got the state of recruitment advertising, the state of sourcing, the state of flexible working, the state of TA. Those are the shows that are going to be taking us into the new year. So if you're interested in that, make sure you follow the channel to get updated. You can also register for those individual shows already. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, if you follow my LinkedIn profile, don't connect with me, by the way. I can't accept any more connections. But if you follow the profile, basically you'll get notified whenever I go live. Okay, that's about it, folks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.